The old woman's screams echoed through the abandoned church as she pulled her husband's body from beneath the collapsed beam. What she found clutched in his frozen hands would expose a 60-year conspiracy that destroyed their family and made them the wealthiest people in 3 counties. Before we dive into this story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. Harold and Evelyn Whitmore had been married for 52 years when their world collapsed. Not metaphorically, though, that happened too, but literally, when the bank foreclosed on their Victorian home in Millfield, Pennsylvania. The house had sheltered 4 generations of Whitmores. Its wraparound porch witnessed a countless summer evenings and holiday gatherings. Now, at ages 78 and 75, they stood on that same porch, watching strangers load their possessions into a moving truck. "Careful with that rocker," Evelyn called out, her voice cracking. "My grandmother nursed my father in that chair." The mover, a young man with sleeve tattoos and gauged ears, barely glanced up. "Lady, we get paid by the hour, not by the memory." Harold placed a weathered hand on his wife's shoulder, feeling her tremble beneath his touch. His other hand gripped Bessie's leash, their one-year-old border collie mix, whose arthritis made her movements as careful as their own. The dog whined softly, pressing against Harold's leg as if trying to offer comfort she didn't understand how to give. Their downfall had begun 3 years earlier, when their son Michael convinced them to refinance the house. "Interest rates are at historic lows," he'd assured them over Sunday dinner. "You could pull out equity for improvements, maybe travel like you always talked about." What Michael hadn't mentioned was his failing construction business, his gambling debts, or that he'd already forged their signatures on preliminary paperwork. By the time they discovered the truth, they were co-signers on loans they'd never knowingly approved. Their home leveraged against Michael's business ventures that collapsed like dominoes in a struggling economy. "We trusted him," Evelyn whispered, watching her china cabinet disappear into the truck. "Our own son." Michael hadn't even shown up for the eviction. His wife Patricia had called that morning with excuses about work obligations and scheduling conflicts. Their daughter Sarah lived in Seattle, too far away to help even if she'd been inclined. She'd sent a text, "So sorry this is happening. Maybe it's time to consider assisted living?" Assisted living. The phrase echoed in Harold's mind like a death sentence. They had $1,847 to their names, the remnants of their savings after legal fees failed to stop the foreclosure. Their Social Security checks, once adequate for a paid-off home, wouldn't cover rent anywhere decent. Medicare didn't cover housing, and no facility would take Bessie. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore?" A young woman in a bank blazer approached, tablet in hand. "I need you to sign the final vacancy confirmation." Harold accepted the stylus with a hand that had once built half the custom cabinets in Millfield. Now it shook as he scrawled his name on the digital screen. Evelyn signed next, tears dropping onto the tablet's surface. "The property needs to be completely vacated by 5 p.m., the woman said, her efficiency barely masking discomfort. "That includes," she glanced at Bessie, "all pets." As the truck pulled away with their life's accumulation, Harold helped Evelyn down the porch steps for the last time. Their 1998 Buick sat in the driveway, packed with what they'd been allowed to keep: 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of photographs, necessary medications, and a cooler with a few days' food. Bessie's bed and bowls were wedged in the back seat. "Where do we go?" Evelyn asked, standing beside the car. Harold had been asking himself the same question for weeks. Hotels cost $80 a night minimum. Apartment deposits were impossible. Their credit, destroyed by Michael's defaults, eliminated most options. Friends their age were dying off, or in facilities themselves. The younger ones had their own struggles. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "You remember the old Riverside church? The one that burned in '09? Evelyn frowned. "That ruins out past Miller's farm?" Harold, "No. Just for a few nights, until we figure something out. It's got partial walls still standing, some roof, better than the car. It's October. It'll be freezing at night. We've got blankets, and Bessie will help keep us warm." He tried to sound confident. "Evelyn, we need somewhere the police won't move us along, somewhere we can think." The alternative went unspoken: homeless shelters that wouldn't take pets. park benches that invited violence, or the ultimate surrender of splitting up to enter different facilities. After 52 years, separation was unthinkable. Evelyn studied her husband's face, seeing past the brave front to the desperation beneath. This man had provided for her their entire marriage. Now, he was suggesting they sleep in ruins because it was the best he could offer. "All right," she said softly, "but we tell no one. I won't have the whole town knowing what we've come to." The drive to Riverside took them through Millfield's downtown, past Hayes Hardware, where Harold had worked for 30 years, past the library where Evelyn had volunteered, past the church, where they'd married in 1971. Each landmark felt like a goodbye. Riverside Church stood 3 miles outside town, down a rutted dirt road that the Buick barely managed. Fire had claimed the structure during renovation work, leaving a Gothic skeleton of stone walls and charred timber. The front portion had collapsed entirely, but the rear sanctuary maintained partial walls and sections of roof. Harold parked behind a stand of overgrown cedars, hiding the car from the main road. They sat for a moment, absorbing their new reality. "When I was a girl," Evelyn said quietly, "I used to have nightmares about being homeless. Mama would comfort me, saying, 'That'll never happen to good people who work hard.'" "Your mama never met predatory lenders or sons who betray trust," Harold replied. They unloaded essentials before darkness fell. Harold had thought ahead, purchasing battery lanterns and a small camp stove with their precious funds. He cleared debris from a corner where 2 walls met, and the roof remained intact, creating a rudimentary shelter. Evelyn spread a tarp on the ground, then blankets, creating the best bed circumstances allowed. Bessie investigated their new surroundings with careful steps, her clouded eyes missing the worst of the devastation. As darkness settled over the ruins, they huddled together for warmth. October in Pennsylvania brought crisp days, but near-freezing nights. Their breath formed clouds in the lantern light. "I'm scared, Harold," Evelyn admitted, something she rarely voiced in 5 decades of marriage. He pulled her closer. "So am I, but we're together. That's what matters." Bessie settled against their legs with a contented sigh, apparently unbothered by the change of venue as long as her people were present. Her simple acceptance brought tears to Evelyn's eyes. "She trusts us completely," she whispered, "and we've brought her to ruins." "Dogs don't judge circumstances," Harold replied. "They judge hearts. Ours are still good, even if our house is gone." They dozed fitfully, waking whenever wind rattled the remaining roof or nocturnal creatures moved through the ruins. Around midnight, rain began, not heavy, but steady enough to find gaps in their shelter. Harold repositioned tarps while Evelyn moved their belongings to drier ground. By dawn, they were exhausted, damp, and facing the harsh reality of homelessness at an age when most people enjoyed grandchildren in retirement communities. Harold's arthritis screamed from the cold ground. Evelyn's chronic cough, usually managed with medication and warm shelter, had worsened overnight. "We can't do this long term," Evelyn said, heating water for instant coffee on their camp stove. "I know." Harold studied the ruins in daylight, noting structural damage he'd missed in darkness. "Maybe just until the weekend. I'll check with Tom Morrison about work. He mentioned needing help with inventory." They both knew the futility. Part-time minimum wage wouldn't rent her apartment, but maintaining hope seemed essential to maintaining sanity. After a breakfast of crackers and peanut butter, Harold decided to explore the ruins more thoroughly. "Might find materials we can use," he explained. Old churches had solid construction, could be useful boards or stones. He took Bessie with him, partly for company and partly because her instincts remained sharp despite failing eyesight. The dog had always possessed an uncanny ability to find things: tennis balls in tall grass, Evelyn's missing glasses, Michael's hidden report cards during his troubled teenage years. The front section of the church proved completely collapsed, tons of rubble blocking what had been the main entrance. But along the side, Harold discovered a partially intact stairway leading down, likely to the old church basement. "What do you think, girl?" he asked Bessie. "Worth investigating?" The dog sniffed at the opening, then began descending carefully. Harold followed, testing each step. The stairs, carved from solid stone, had survived the fire better than wood above. The basement was a revelation. While fire had consumed the upper structure, the underground space remained largely intact. Stone walls showed smoke damage but stood solid. More surprisingly, the space wasn't empty. Rows of wooden shelving filled one wall, holding what appeared to be old church records and artifacts. A massive iron safe occupied one corner, its door hanging partially open. Furniture draped in dusty sheets created ghostly shapes in the lantern light. "Evelyn," Harold called up the stairs. "You need to see this." She descended carefully, gasping at the preserved space. "How did no one clear this out after the fire? Insurance dispute, maybe? Or everyone just assumed it was destroyed?" Harold approached the safe, noting its antique construction. "This thing's from the 1800s at least." The safe's interior held disappointment. Empty except for water-damaged hymn books and moldy collection envelopes. But as Harold reached to close the door, Bessie began pawing insistently at the floor beneath it. "What is it, girl?" He knelt beside her, running his hands over the stones. One felt different, slightly raised, with worn edges suggesting frequent handling. Working together, Harold and Evelyn pried up the stone, revealing a metal box beneath. Their hands trembled as they lifted it out, both from exhaustion and anticipation. The box opened easily, revealing contents that made no immediate sense. A leather journal wrapped in oilcloth, several old photographs, and a heavy brass key attached to a wooden tag reading Whitmore Trust, 1962. "Whitmore," Evelyn breathed. "Harold, that's your family name." Harold opened the journal with careful fingers. His father's handwriting leaped from the pages, precise and formal as the man himself had been. The 15th of October, 1962. "This record serves as testament to actions I pray God will forgive. The Whitmore family treasure, accumulated over 4 generations of honest labor and careful saving, rests not in banks that failed our neighbors, but in sanctuary befitting our faith." Harold's hands shook as he read aloud. His father, Stern Samuel Whitmore, had been Riverside Church's treasurer for 40 years. The journal revealed a stunning secret. After watching the Depression destroy friends' savings, Samuel had worked with then-pastor Reverend Mills to create a hidden cache beneath the church. But not just family money, Harold continued reading. Church funds, donations from parishioners who trusted Samuel's judgment over banks, gold coins, silver certificates, jewelry donated by widows, all hidden to protect the community's wealth. The journal detailed the location: a secondary vault beneath the basement's east wall, accessed by the brass key. Samuel had planned to reveal the treasure when the economy stabilized, but his sudden death in 1963 had buried the secret. The fire decades later had seemingly sealed it forever. "Your father did this?" Evelyn asked. Harold nodded, memories surfacing. "He was always paranoid about banks after the Depression. Mother said he kept cash in coffee cans. We thought he was just eccentric." They found the hidden door exactly where the journal indicated, concealed behind a wooden shelf unit. The brass key turned with surprising ease, well-oiled mechanisms responding after 60 years of waiting. The vault beyond took their breath away, wooden crates stacked neat, as Samuel's handwriting filled a space the size of a small bedroom. Each bore labels in his careful script: emergency fund, widow's trust, building restoration, community aid. Harold opened the nearest crate with trembling fingers. Gold coins gleamed in the lantern, light double eagles, liberty heads, pieces dating to the 1800s. Current value would be staggering. Another crate held silver certificates and old bills, preserved perfectly in the cool, dry vault. Jewelry boxes revealed donations from parishioners long dead. Their faith in Samuel's stewardship finally validated. There must be. Evelyn couldn't finish the calculation. Millions, Harold completed. In today's values, easily millions. They stood in stunned silence, processing the reversal of fortune. Yesterday, they'd been homeless. Today, they held wealth beyond imagining. Yet questions immediately arose. "This isn't all ours," Evelyn said. "The journal mentions community funds, church money." Harold nodded. "But the church is gone. Most of those families moved away or died out. How do we even determine ownership?" What happens next will transform not just their lives, but their entire community, reveal family secrets buried for decades, and force them to choose between fortune and honor. If you're enjoying this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. They spent hours in the vault, cataloging contents with the methodical care Harold had learned from his father. The journal provided detailed records every deposit, every donor, every intention for the funds. Samuel's integrity shone through his meticulous documentation. Among personal effects, they found letters between Samuel and Reverend Mills discussing the moral implications of their actions. Both men had wrestled with the decision, ultimately concluding that preserving their community's wealth superseded strict legal protocols. "Look at this," Evelyn said, holding a ledger. "Your father tracked every family who contributed. The Millers, the Johnsons, the Kowalskis. Half the town had savings here. And they never knew," Harold murmured. "All those families who struggled after his death, who could have used this money, they never knew it existed. The weight of discovery pressed upon them. This wealth could solve their immediate crisis. Homelessness vanished with a single gold coin's value, but claiming it felt like theft from the dead. We need to think," Evelyn said. "Not here in the emotion of discovery, but carefully." They selected a small bag of coins enough for immediate needs and carefully resealed the vault. The decision about the rest would require clear heads and clean consciences. Returning to their makeshift camp in the ruins above, they found Bessie patiently waiting, tail wagging at their return. The dog seemed unsurprised by their discovery, as if she'd known all along what lay beneath. First things first, Harold decided. We get proper shelter. Can't make good decisions while freezing. They drove to Millfield's only motel, the Traveler's Rest, where $65 bought them a warm room and hot showers. Bessie settled on the carpet with obvious relief, while Harold and Evelyn took turns washing away days of desperation. Clean and warm, they faced each other across the small motel table. Between them lay Samuel's journal and their moral dilemma. "Your father meant this for emergencies," Evelyn said. "I'd say being homeless at 78 qualifies. But not just our emergency. He was protecting the whole community's future, a community that barely exists anymore. Millfield's dying, Harold. Half the stores are closed. Young people leave and don't return." Harold studied his father's photograph tucked in the journal, stern-faced Samuel who'd never smiled easily but had loved deeply. "What would he want us to do?" "Protect the family first," Evelyn said without hesitation. "That was always his priority. But," she paused, "he'd want it done honorably." They talked through the night, weighing options and obligations. By dawn, a plan had emerged, imperfect but workable. First, they'd secure their own stability. A modest portion of the treasure would purchase a small home, cover medical expenses, ensure they'd never face homelessness again. Not luxury, but security. Second, they'd research every family mentioned in the ledgers. Where descendants could be found, they'd receive their inheritance anonymously. Where bloodlines had ended, those funds would establish a Millfield Restoration Trust. It could revitalize the town, Harold said, warming to the idea. Business grants, home repairs, scholarship funds. What Samuel saved could save Millfield itself. But carefully, Evelyn cautioned. Too much too fast would raise questions. The IRS would investigate. People would dig into the source. They agreed to work slowly, methodically, just as Samuel would have. Harold would research genealogies while Evelyn created a distribution plan. They'd need legal help eventually, but not until they understood the full scope. That afternoon, they visited Millfield's library, where Evelyn had volunteered for decades. Head librarian Martha Collins greeted them warmly, though her eyes showed concern at their worn appearance. "Evelyn? Harold? We heard about the house. I'm so sorry. We're managing," Evelyn replied. "Actually, we're hoping to do some genealogy research. Old Millfield families from the 1962nd. Martha's face lit up. "You're in luck. The Historical Society just digitized all the old records. What families are you researching?" They spent days in the library, tracing bloodlines and tracking diaspora. The Millers had scattered after their farm failed descendants in California, Texas, Florida. The Johnsons remained local, struggling to keep their hardware store afloat. The Kowalskis had tragedy upon tragedy, leaving only elderly Marie in the nursing home. Each discovery added weight to their responsibility. These weren't just names in a ledger, but real people with real struggles that Samuel's hidden wealth could ease. "Look at this," Harold said one afternoon. Tom Morrison, his grandfather, contributed $500 in 1961. Tom's barely keeping his store open, and his family's money has been sitting in that vault earning nothing for 60 years. While earning everything, Evelyn corrected. Gold's value has multiplied many times over. That $500 might be worth $50,000 now. The magnitude of their secret grew heavier daily. They'd moved from the motel to a modest rental house on Maple Street, paying 6 months in advance with cash that raised no eyebrows from the elderly landlord. Bessie had a fenced yard. They had heat and comfort. Yet guilt shadowed their relief. Michael called 3 weeks after their eviction, his voice carefully casual. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. Heard you and Mom found a place." "News travels," Harold replied neutrally. "Patricia drove by the old house yesterday. New owners are already renovating. Probably for the best you couldn't maintain that big place forever." The callousness stung. Their son showed no remorse for his role in their loss, no curiosity about their survival. He'd written them off as easily as he'd forged their signatures. "We're fine," Harold said simply. "Good, good. Listen, I know things have been tight. If you need a loan, from the man who stole our home?" The words escaped before Harold could stop them. Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Michael's voice returned, defensive and angry. "I didn't steal anything. You signed those papers. Papers you presented dishonestly. Papers that destroyed our lives. You're being dramatic. It's just a house." Harold hung up without responding. Just a house. Just 52 years of memories, security, dignity. Just everything they'd worked for, dismissed in 3 words. "Who was that?" Evelyn asked from the doorway. "Wrong number," Harold lied, unwilling to burden her with Michael's callousness. But Evelyn knew. 52 years of marriage created a language beyond words. She crossed to him, taking his weathered hands in hers. "We have each other," she said. "And Bessie. And now we have purpose. That's more than many can claim." Harold nodded, drawing strength from her touch. Tomorrow, they'd return to the vault and begin the careful process of restoration. Not just their own, but the entire community Samuel had tried to protect. As autumn deepened toward winter, Harold and Evelyn established routines around their secret work. Mornings found them at the library, researching families and creating detailed distribution plans. Afternoons involved discreet inquiries, visiting the courthouse for property records, checking cemetery logs for death dates, carefully questioning longtime residents about old families. "You're certainly thorough," Martha observed one day. "This genealogy project must be important. It's become a passion," Evelyn replied truthfully. "Understanding where we come from helps us know where we're going." They developed cover stories for their improved circumstances. Harold claimed he'd found valuable tools in storage to sell. Evelyn mentioned a small inheritance from a distant relative, nothing dramatic enough to invite scrutiny, just enough to explain their stability. The first anonymous gift went to Marie Kowalski. They'd discovered her grandfather had deposited $1,200 in gold coins with Samuel, his life savings meant to buy a house. The Depression had prevented the purchase, and the money had vanished into the vault's secrecy. Now, 89 and confined to Sunset Manor nursing home, Marie survived on Medicaid and memories. Harold and Evelyn calculated the gold's current value, added reasonable interest, and had a cashier's check for $75,000 delivered by a lawyer claiming to represent an estate resolution for pre-1965 deposits. "I don't understand," Marie told the lawyer, hands shaking as she held the check. "My grandfather lost everything in the bank failure." "Apparently, not everything," the lawyer replied, following the script Harold had provided. "Some assets were preserved through alternative means. This represents full value plus accumulated appreciation." News of Marie's windfall spread through Millfield like wildfire. Suddenly, residents were digging through old papers, searching for evidence of deposits from the 1,960 seconds. The beauty of Samuel's record-keeping became apparent. Only those truly owed would have documentation matching his ledgers. "We started something," Evelyn murmured, watching the library fill with treasure hunters. "Samuel started it," Harold corrected. "We're just finishing his work." They made their second distribution to the Morrison family. Tom Morrison had given Harold part-time work after the foreclosure, paying what he could from a failing business. Discovering his grandfather's $500 deposit felt like cosmic justice. This time, they were more creative. A regional business grant for establishments operating continuously since 1960 arrived, just as Tom faced final foreclosure notices. The $50,000 saved Morrison Hardware and allowed expansion into online sales. "It's a miracle," Tom told Harold over coffee. "I was ready to close. 3 generations of Morrisons ended. Then this grant appears like divine intervention." "Maybe it is," Harold suggested. "Good things happen to good people eventually." Each distribution required careful planning. Too much sudden wealth would trigger investigations. Too little wouldn't achieve Samuel's protective intent. They walked a delicate line between generosity and exposure. Winter arrived with unusual severity, testing their new home's heating and their old bones' endurance. Bessie developed a cough that worried them until antibiotics resolved it. The vet bill would have been impossible weeks earlier. Now it was merely expensive. "I still feel guilty," Evelyn confessed one snowy evening. "Living comfortably while others struggle." "We're fixing that," Harold reminded her. Slowly but surely, by Christmas, they'd completed 7 distributions. The Johnsons received a historical preservation grant for their hardware store. The Miller descendants found unclaimed property settlements in their mailboxes. Each gift was carefully sized, legally structured, and utterly untraceable to the vault. Millfield began showing signs of renewal. Morrison Hardware hired 2 employees. Johnson's store restored its original tin ceiling. Marie Kowalski moved to a private room and established a scholarship fund for nursing students. Money flowed through the community like fresh blood through old veins. "The town feels different," Martha commented during a library board meeting Harold attended. More hopeful somehow. If she wondered why Harold had suddenly paid 5 years of overdue membership fees, she didn't voice it. Good fortune was contagious in small towns. Questions might break the spell. Michael called again on Christmas Eve. Patricia's voice preceded his artificially bright. "Merry Christmas, Mom and Dad. We're calling to share wonderful news." Harold put the phone on speaker, sensing Evelyn should hear whatever followed. "We're pregnant," Patricia announced. "Due in June. You're going to be grandparents again." The words hung in the air like accusation. Again. As if they'd failed the first time. As if their absence from their grandchildren's lives was choice rather than consequence. "Congratulations," Evelyn managed. "We're hoping you'll be involved," Michael added quickly. "Fresh start and all that. Maybe you could even help with childcare. Patricia's promotion requires travel." There it was, the reason for contact. They needed something. "We'll see what we can do," Harold replied carefully. After hanging up, they sat in silence. The child growing in Patricia's womb was innocent of its parents' sins. Could they punish an unborn grandchild for Michael's betrayal? "Blood and money," Evelyn finally said. "The 2 things that complicate every life." "We have plenty of both now," Harold observed. "The question is how we use them." They decided to wait, to watch, to see if Michael's overture represented genuine reconciliation or mere opportunism. Time would reveal truth, as it had revealed the vault. January brought a registered letter that stopped their hearts. Office of Historical Preservation, investigation of Riverside Church site. Someone had noticed their visits to the ruins, had questions about activity at a supposedly abandoned location. "We knew this might happen," Evelyn said, though her hands trembled. They met the investigator, a young woman named Kelly Chen, at the site on a bitter Tuesday morning. She surveyed the ruins with professional interest, making notes on a tablet. "We've had reports of people accessing this structure," she said. "Safety concerns, liability issues. The county's considering demolition. Demolition? Harold's voice cracked. Unless historical significance can be established. That's why I'm here. She consulted her tablet. Records showed this was Riverside Methodist, built 1887, burned 2009. Nothing remarkable architecturally. Harold and Evelyn exchanged glances. The vault's existence would certainly establish significance, but at what cost? My father was treasurer here, Harold offered carefully. Samuel Whitmore. Served 40 years until his death in 1963. Kelly's expression shifted. Whitmore? Are you related to the Whitmore Foundation that's been making anonymous grants around town? They'd never used the Whitmore name on any distribution. How had she connected them? I'm not aware of any foundation, Harold said truthfully. Kelly studied them with sharp intelligence. Mr. Whitmore, I specialize in tracking historical assets. Old church records often reveal fascinating financial patterns. Your father's tenure overlapped with the Depression, didn't it? The ground felt unsteady beneath Harold's feet. This young woman was circling their secret like a hawk above prey. Many people served churches during hard times, Evelyn interjected. Indeed, and some found creative ways to protect community assets. Kelly smiled. Ways that might seem unusual by today's standards, but were heroic in context. She knew. Somehow, this investigator had pieced together enough to guess at the truth. If, Kelly continued carefully, someone were preserving historical assets for community benefit, that would be admirable, especially if done through proper legal channels to avoid tax complications or ownership disputes. That sounds very specific, Harold observed. Historical preservation is my passion, Mr. Whitmore. Preserving both structures and stories. Some stories are best told carefully, through actions rather than words. She handed Harold her card. I'll recommend against demolition. This site has clear historical significance. Even if that significance isn't public knowledge, perhaps we could discuss preservation options privately. After she left, Harold and Evelyn stood in the ruins processing the encounter. She knows, Evelyn said, but she's offering to help. Why? Maybe because she sees what we see, a chance to restore more than just buildings. That evening, they made a decision that would have seemed impossible months earlier. They called Kelly Chen. Thank you for reaching out, she said. I've been hoping you would. Can we meet somewhere private? They chose their small rental house, serving tea in the living room while Bessie dozed by the radiator. Kelly listened without interruption as Harold told the entire story. Samuel's vault, their discovery, the distributions. You've been remarkably careful, she said when he finished. But you need legal protection. The IRS will eventually notice patterns. Someone will connect dots. We've worried about that, Evelyn admitted. I can help. My undergraduate degree was in tax law before I switched to historical preservation. What you're doing, returning assets to their rightful owners, can be structured legally. The anonymous approach was smart initially, but long-term success requires transparency. Full disclosure? Harold asked. Modified disclosure. A trust acknowledging found historical assets without revealing specifics. Legal structure protecting you while enabling continued distributions. And Riverside, Evelyn wondered, becomes a historical site. The vault's existence, properly documented, ensures preservation. We can even restore the church as a community center, funded by a portion of the assets. It was elegant, comprehensive, and terrifying. Bringing others into their secret multiplied risk exponentially. Why help us? Harold asked directly. Kelly smiled. My grandmother received an anonymous grant last month. Morrison, her maiden name. She cried for hours, believing her father's spirit had somehow provided. I traced the patterns, realized someone was methodically helping old Millfield families. She leaned forward. What you're doing is beautiful. Let me help do it right. Trust came hard after Michael's betrayal, but something in Kelly's directness, her lack of greed or guile, resonated. They agreed to consider her proposal. February brought two developments that reinforced their decision. First, the IRS sent a routine inquiry about their improved financial status. Second, Michael announced he and Patricia were moving back to Millfield. The baby changes everything, he explained during an unexpected visit. We want to be near family. I've been offered a position with Davidson Construction. Patricia can work remotely. Harold studied his son across their small kitchen table. Michael had aged in the months since the foreclosure, gray threading through his hair, lines etched by stress or guilt. And our relationship? Harold asked directly. Michael shifted uncomfortably. I know things have been strained. The house situation. I made mistakes, bad decisions that hurt you both. It was the closest to an apology they'd receive. Mistakes, Evelyn repeated. Is that what we're calling theft and betrayal now? Michael flinched. I deserve that. I know what I did was wrong. The gambling got out of control. I kept thinking one good bet would fix everything. Instead, I destroyed the people who loved me most. Real tears appeared in his eyes. Harold felt Evelyn's hand find his beneath the table, a silent communication of shared uncertainty. I'm in recovery now, Michael continued. Gamblers, Anonymous, therapy, the works. Patricia threatened to leave if I didn't get help. Almost losing her, and the baby finally woke me up. And you expect us to just forgive and forget? Harold asked. No, I expect to earn forgiveness if that's even possible. Day by day, action by action. Starting with this. He placed a cashier's check on the table. $5,000. Not much against what they lost, but clearly significant for someone rebuilding. First installment, Michael said. I'll never repay the full debt, but I need to try. After he left, Harold and Evelyn debated through dinner. People can change, Evelyn argued. The baby deserves grandparents who at least try. Or he's playing another angle, Harold countered. Maybe he's heard about the mysterious grants around town. Maybe he suspects we're involved. Maybe. But what if he's sincere? What if denying him prevents the redemption Samuel's money is providing others? Harold had no answer. Trust, once shattered, rebuilt slowly, if at all. They met with Kelly Chen the next week, bringing Samuel's journal and ledgers. Her professionalism impressed them as she outlined a legal structure protecting all parties. A historical trust with you as directors, she explained. The vault's contents become trust assets, legally found property after statutory periods. Tax obligations are met through careful documentation. Distributions continue, but with proper oversight. And our personal situation? Evelyn asked. You've suffered documented losses through financial elder abuse. The trust can legally compensate directors who've experienced such hardship. Everything above board. Everything ethical. It took 3 weeks of legal preparation. But by spring, the Millfield Historical Trust was official. Harold and Evelyn served as directors alongside Kelly and 2 respected community members who understood the trust's unique origins. The trust's first official act was purchasing the Riverside ruins, beginning restoration plans that would create a community center while preserving the basement's historical significance. The vault remained secret. Its contents gradually transferred to secure trust management. Samuel would be proud, Evelyn said, watching construction crews stabilize the old walls. Harold nodded. His father's rigid personality had hidden deep compassion. The man who'd seemed cold had spent decades protecting neighbors' futures. By April, they'd distributed over $800,000 to documented families. Millfield showed signs of genuine renewal, new businesses opening. Young families moving in, attracted by affordable housing and community spirit. Michael and Patricia rented a house 2 blocks away. Their interactions remained cautious but civil. Harold and Evelyn agreed to supervise visits after the baby's birth. Boundaries firm but not impermeable. Redemption's a process, Evelyn observed, watching Michael help Patricia with nursery preparations. For all of us. The baby arrived on a perfect June morning, a girl they named Hope. When Michael placed her in Evelyn's arms at the hospital, something long frozen began to thaw. She's perfect, Evelyn whispered. Like her grandmother, Michael replied. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I know words aren't enough, but I need you to hear them. Harold watched from the doorway, his own emotions complex. The grandfather in him wanted to embrace this new beginning. The wounded father remained wary. Time would tell which instinct proved correct. As summer bloomed across Millfield, the town's transformation became undeniable. Morrison Hardware expanded into the adjacent building. Johnson's store hosted weekly community gatherings. Marie Kowalski's scholarship fund sent its first student to nursing school. "You did this," Kelly told Harold and Evelyn during a trust meeting. "Your courage in the ruins that night saved a town." "Samuel did it," Harold corrected. "We just finished what he started." But privately, he knew the truth was more complex. Their willingness to sleep in ruins, to risk everything rather than surrender dignity, had led to discovery. Desperation had become deliverance through faith, courage, and a dog named Bessie who knew where to dig. By the anniversary of their eviction, Harold and Evelyn had purchased a modest home on Oak Street, nothing grand like their lost Victorian, but comfortable and truly theirs. Bessie dozed on her favorite chair, arthritis eased by expensive medication they could now afford. The doorbell rang that October evening, interrupting their quiet dinner. Harold opened it to find Michael and Patricia with baby Hope. "We know this is the day," Michael said simply. "The day we lost the house. We wanted to acknowledge it, to say we know what today means." Evelyn appeared behind Harold, her expression unreadable. Patricia stepped forward. "We brought dinner. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread. We thought maybe we could share a meal. Remember what matters?" It was presumptuous, assuming welcome where trust remained fragile. Yet hope gurgled in her carrier, innocent of history, embodying possibility. "Come in," Evelyn decided. "Hope needs to know her grandparents." They ate together not as the family they'd been, but as the family they might become. Conversation stayed surface level, but shared laughter over Hope's expressions created tiny bridges across old chasms. After they left, Harold and Evelyn cleaned dishes in companionable silence. "Think we'll ever fully forgive him?" Harold asked. "I think we'll keep trying," Evelyn replied. "That's what love does, it keeps trying." Later, reviewing trust documents in his study, Harold found a note in Samuel's journal he'd previously overlooked. "True wealth lies not in what we hoard, but in what we share. I pray whoever finds this treasure uses it to heal wounds money cannot measure." Harold smiled, understanding finally complete. The treasure hadn't been just gold and silver, but the opportunity for redemption of a town, of families, of relationships, shattered by hardship. Outside, Millfield prepared for its first harvest festival in decades, funded by the Historical Trust, but organized by a community rediscovering its spirit. Harold could see preparations from his window lights stringing between lampposts, vendors setting up booths, children practicing performances. "Coming to bed?" Evelyn called. "In a moment." He closed Samuel's journal, hand resting on its worn cover. Tomorrow, the Trust would announce its largest project yet: full restoration of Riverside Church as a community center, including a museum documenting the town's Depression-era resilience. The vault would be revealed, empty now but powerful in its symbolism. Samuel's secret would become Millfield's pride, a story of neighbors protecting neighbors, of trust transcending law, of wealth preserved not for greed but for grace. Bessie padded into the study, gray muzzle nudging Harold's hand. Together, they walked to the bedroom where Evelyn waited, their reflected love warming the small space. They'd lost a house but found a purpose. Sacrificed false security but discovered true wealth. Slept in ruins but awakened to possibility. "No regrets?" Evelyn asked as Harold settled beside her. "None that matter," he replied. Through their window, stars sparkled above Millfield like scattered coins, each one a wish or prayer or promise. Somewhere in the darkness, other elderly couples faced their own trials. Harold hoped their story might somehow reach them proof that endings could become beginnings, that ruins could hold treasures, that love endures beyond loss. As sleep claimed them, Bessie's gentle snoring provided familiar comfort. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fresh opportunities to extend Samuel's legacy of protection. But tonight, Harold and Evelyn Whitmore rested secure in the knowledge that they'd transformed catastrophe into redemption. Their treasure had indeed changed lives, starting with their own. The Harvest Festival exceeded all expectations. Thousands attended from surrounding counties. Drawn by word of Millfield's renewal, Harold and Evelyn worked the Historical Trust booth, sharing carefully edited stories of the town's resilience. "Is it true about the treasure?" children asked wide-eyed. "Every town has treasures," Harold would answer. Sometimes in vaults, sometimes in people. Millfield has both. Michael and Patricia attended with hope, maintaining respectful distance while staying visible. Progress, not perfection, defined their relationship now. As sunset painted the festival golden, Mayor Davidson called Harold and Evelyn to the bandstand. "These two embody Millfield's spirit," he announced. "From hardship to hope, they've shown us that our best days aren't behind us but ahead." The crowd applauded as Harold and Evelyn stood awkwardly, unaccustomed to praise. They'd worked so hard to remain anonymous that public recognition felt foreign. "Say something," the mayor urged. Harold cleared his throat, Evelyn's hands steadying him. "My father believed in this town," he began. "Believed enough to protect its future when everything seemed lost. We're just continuing his work. But the real treasure isn't what was hidden, it's what we're building together." More applause, genuine and warm. In the crowd, Harold spotted families they'd helped. Morrisons and Johnsons, Marie Kowalski in her wheelchair, dozens of others whose lives had been touched by Samuel's foresight and their courage. After the festival, exhausted but exhilarated, they found Kelly Chin waiting at their house. "There's something you should see," she said, holding a folder. Inside were documents she'd discovered in state archives, letters between Samuel and government officials during the Depression, proposals for community protection programs he developed but never implemented. "Your father was ahead of his time," Kelly explained. "These ideas about community trusts and asset protection, economists study similar concepts now. He pioneered them out of necessity and compassion." Harold read his father's words with new appreciation. The stern man he'd known as a child had possessed visionary understanding of economics and community. "There's more," Kelly continued. "I've been contacted by universities wanting to study the Millfield model, how a town can protect and revitalize itself through community trust. You've created something that could help other struggling communities." The scope overwhelmed. They'd simply wanted to honor Samuel's legacy and help neighbors. Now academics discuss their accidental innovation. "We're not scholars," Evelyn protested. "No, you're better. You're practitioners. You lived it, proved it works." As autumn deepened toward winter, changes accumulated. The restored Riverside Church hosted its first community event, a wedding between Tom Morrison's daughter and her high school sweetheart who'd returned to Millfield for its opportunities. Harold and Evelyn sat in pews they'd helped restore, watching young love pledge forever in a building that had sheltered secrets and dreams across centuries. "Think they'll make it?" Evelyn whispered. "They're starting with hope in a place that nurtures it. Better odds than most." Michael approached after the ceremony, hope babbling in his arms. Their relationship had evolved to careful cordiality, sharing holidays, acknowledging milestones, slowly rebuilding. "Patricia's pregnant again," he said quietly. "A boy this time." "Congratulations," Harold offered, meaning it. Children were innocents deserving love regardless of parental failures. "We're thinking of naming him Samuel, if that's okay." The request caught Harold off guard. His father's name on Michael's child redemption and remembrance intertwined. "Dad would be honored," he managed. That evening, Harold visited the completed Vault Museum. Display cases held replicas of Samuel's ledgers, photographs of Depression-era Millfield, and stories of families helped by the trust. The actual vault stood empty but preserved, its door open to show visitors the sacred space where hope had hibernated. A plaque by the entrance read, "In memory of Samuel Whitmore, who understood that true wealth lies in community, and to Harold and Evelyn Whitmore, who had the courage to complete his vision." "We should have stayed anonymous," Harold muttered. "Too late now," Evelyn laughed. "Besides, people need heroes they can see, touch, thank." Winter arrived gently that year, as if nature itself recognized Millfield's fragility and chose kindness. The historical trust work continued, more families found, more businesses supported, more dreams enabled. One snowy morning, a letter arrived that changed their perspective again. It was from Australia, their daughter Sarah, who'd maintained minimal contact for years. "Dear Mom and Dad, I've followed Millfield's transformation through online news. When I realized you were central to its renewal, I wept for hours, not from surprise you were always my heroes, but from shame at my absence during your trials. I'm coming home. Not just to visit, but to stay. My marriage ended last year. I didn't tell you, couldn't bear admitting another family failure. But watching you rebuild from ruins gives me courage to rebuild too. The woman who ran community dinners and the man who fixed everything broken, those are the parents I need now. Millfield needs a new doctor. I need my family. May I come home? Evelyn sobbed over the letter while Harold held her, their own tears mingling. Sarah, their brilliant daughter who'd fled to medicine and distance, was choosing return, both children finding their way back. Evelyn marveled. Maybe that's the deepest treasure, Harold suggested. Not gold, but the gravity of love that pulls families together despite everything. Sarah arrived in January, competent and broken in equal measure. She moved into a downtown apartment, began working at Millfield Clinic, and slowly integrated into their lives. Watching their children navigate adulthood's complexities, Harold and Evelyn recognized their own journey's value. They'd modeled resilience, shown that rock bottom could become foundation for climbing. "You slept in ruins?" Sarah asked one evening, voice hushed with horror and admiration. "3 nights," Harold confirmed, "until Bessie found the vault. It must have been terrifying." "Less terrifying than surrendering dignity," Evelyn replied. "Fear ends. Self-respect endures." As winter yielded to spring, Millfield bloomed literally and figuratively. New businesses opened monthly. Young families moved in, drawn by affordable housing and authentic community. The Historical Trust carefully managed growth, ensuring preservation of character while enabling progress. Harold often walked past their old Victorian on Maple Street, now owned by a family with 4 children who'd restored it beautifully. Instead of bitterness, he felt satisfaction. The house sheltered laughter again. One April morning, he found Michael at the cemetery, placing flowers on Samuel's grave. "Grandpa saved us all," Michael said without turning. "His foresight, your courage, my eventual wake-up call." Harold stood beside his son. Their relationship still complicated, but no longer combative. He was a difficult man, Harold admitted. Cold, demanding, impossible to please. But underneath, he loved fiercely, Michael finished. "Like you, I'm sorry it took losing everything to see it." They stood quietly, 2 generations honoring a third, bound by blood and broken trust, slowly healing. The second Harvest Festival surpassed the first. National media covered Millfield's resurrection, calling it the miracle on Main Street. Harold and Evelyn declined interviews, directing attention to the community itself. But one persistent reporter uncovered enough truth to write a feature story. The couple who slept in ruins and saved a town. It went viral, bringing donations and inquiries from struggling communities nationwide. "We need to share the model," Kelly urged during a trust meeting. "Create a handbook, offer consulting, help other towns protect themselves." Harold resisted. "We're not experts. We just did what seemed right." "Exactly. You acted from necessity and compassion, not theory. That's what others need to learn." They compromised, agreeing to host quarterly workshops where community leaders could study Millfield's approach. The first session brought representatives from 50 towns, eager to understand how catastrophe became catalyst. Watching earnest people take notes on community trust structures and anonymous distribution methods, Harold felt Samuel's presence strongly. His father's rigid principles, applied with compassion, had created a replicable revolution. "He'd be astonished," Evelyn murmured. "He'd pretend to disapprove while being secretly proud," Harold corrected, knowing his father's patterns. Summer brought baby Samuel Whitmore into the world, Michael and Patricia's son carrying forward a name that now meant protection and provision. At the baptism in Riverside Church, 4 generations gathered. Baby Samuel, his parents, his grandparents, and through legacy, if not presence, his great-grandfather. Sarah served as godmother, her own life stabilizing through service to Millfield's underserved. She'd started dating Tom Morrison's son, a relationship that amused Harold given their family's intertwined financial history. "Morrison and Whitmore together again," he told Evelyn. "Samuel's ledger comes full circle." As their second anniversary of homelessness approached, Harold and Evelyn reflected on transformation. They'd gone from housed to homeless to home builders, from comfortable to desperate to instrumental. Any regrets had become their evening ritual? Only one, Evelyn admitted this night. Bessie, their faithful dog, had died peacefully in spring, arthritis and age claiming her gently. She'd been buried in their backyard with a stone reading, "Bessie who found more than gold." She lived to see us secure, Harold comforted. Completed her mission, our guardian angel in fur, Evelyn agreed. A knock interrupted their reverie. Michael stood at the door holding baby Samuel, his expression urgent. "Patricia's in the hospital. Complications from a fall. Can you watch Samuel overnight?" Without hesitation, they welcomed their grandson, crisis erasing careful boundaries. As Michael rushed back to Patricia, Harold and Evelyn settled into grandparent rhythms forgotten since Sarah's childhood. "Life circular," Evelyn observed, warming formula with practiced ease. Harold agreed, walking Samuel around the living room in the age-old pattern of soothing babies. This child would know only the rebuilt family, the renewed town, the redemptive ending. His inheritance included more than money. It encompassed resilience modeled and mercy extended. Patricia recovered fully, but the crisis had shifted dynamics. Need had overridden awkwardness. Trust had been extended and honored. Baby Samuel became a bridge between what was broken and what was building. By autumn, relationships had evolved to something resembling normal. Not the old normal that was gone forever, like the Victorian on Maple Street, but a new configuration, allowing for history while enabling future. The Historical Trust announced its most ambitious project yet, a senior center offering everything from medical care to social connection, funded entirely by Samuel's legacy. It would be named Whitmore Center, honoring both the man who saved and the couple who served. "He's becoming mythological," Harold worried. "The stern banker who saved Christmas. That wasn't Dad at all." "Myths serve purposes," Kelly counseled. "They inspire and instruct. The details matter less than the impact." At the groundbreaking ceremony, Harold shoveled the first earth with the same hands that had pried up stones in Riverside's basement. The crowd applauded, but he heard deeper music, the sound of a community healing, families reconciling, hope rebuilding. Sarah gave a speech as both doctor and daughter, weaving medical metaphors with personal testimony. Michael and Patricia stood with other young families drawn back to Millfield by opportunity and community. Baby Samuel gurgled from his grandfather's arms, unknowing heir to complicated legacy, simplified by love. "None of this would exist without my parents' courage," Sarah concluded. "They teach us that sometimes we must lose everything to find what matters, that ruins can hold treasures, that the oldest love might be the truest gold." As winter approached again, Harold and Evelyn prepared for their third year of transformation. The work continued, more families found, more projects funded, more communities learning from Millfield's model. One snowy evening, sorting through restoration papers, Evelyn discovered something that made her gasp. Hidden in Samuel's journal, pressed between pages, was a letter dated just before his death. "To whoever finds this treasure, I pray you are family, bound by blood or circumstance to care for our community. The wealth hidden here represents more than money. It embodies trust itself. Neighbors trusted me with their futures. I trust you to complete what I couldn't. If you're reading this, likely I'm gone and times are hard. They always are, in different ways. But hardship reveals character, and character creates solutions. Use what I preserved, not for personal gain, but communal renewal. My son Harold shows signs of my own stubbornness. I pray he also inherited my hidden compassion. If he's the one reading this, know that every stern word came from love, every hard lesson from desire to prepare you for hard times. Trust begets trust. Compassion compounds like interest. What starts small can transform communities if carefully tended. Guard the treasure. Share the wealth. Trust the process. With love I could never speak aloud, Samuel Whitmore. Harold wept over his father's words. Decades of misunderstanding dissolving. The cold man had loved intensely, expressed through deed rather than word. He knew, Harold marveled, somehow knew it would be me finding this. Parents know their children, Evelyn said softly. Even when children don't know themselves, they framed the letter, hanging it in the Riverside Museum, where Samuel's story inspired new generations. Visitors often pause longest there, recognizing universal themes of family complexity and redemptive possibility. As their story spread beyond Millfield, invitations arrived to speak at conferences, consult with struggling communities, even write books about the Whitmore method. They declined most, preferring local work to national spotlight. But when the President's Council on Community Revitalization called, offering to fund Millfield model programs nationwide, they couldn't refuse. Samuel's Depression-era innovation would help recession-era communities find resilience. The day before traveling to Washington for the announcement, Harold and Evelyn visited Riverside Church one last time as a ruin. Tomorrow, reconstruction would begin in earnest, transforming the skeleton into a community center. They stood where they'd first slept, desperate and frightened, unaware of treasure beneath their feet. Sunlight slanted through absent roof, illuminating dust motes like tiny gold flakes. If we could tell those people cold and scared that night, what lay ahead? Evelyn mused. They wouldn't believe it, Harold finished. I barely believe it now, all from sleeping in ruins, Evelyn murmured. All from refusing to surrender dignity, Harold corrected. The ruins just happened to hold what we needed. A car horn interrupted their reverie. Michael waited to drive them to the airport, their relationship rebuilt enough to share such transitions. In the back seat, baby Samuel slept in his carrier, the future incarnate. As they drove through Millfield, Harold cataloged changes. Morrison Hardware's expansion, Johnson's Cafe, the senior center under construction, young families in restored homes, hope replacing resignation on faces. Dad, Michael said quietly, I need you to know something. What you and Mom did, not just with the treasure, but with me, it saved my life. I was heading toward destruction. Watching you rebuild from nothing showed me redemption was possible. Harold reached forward, gripping his son's shoulder. Everyone deserves second chances. Your grandfather knew that. Just took us a while to learn it. At the airport, Sarah met them with medical journals documenting Millfield's improved health statistics since revitalization began. Lower depression rates, reduced substance abuse, increased longevity, community health, reflecting economic health. You didn't just save buildings, she told her parents. You saved lives. The Washington ceremony blurred past in a haze of speeches and handshakes. Harold and Evelyn stood uncomfortably in formal clothes, accepting praise for actions born of desperation. When asked to speak, Harold kept it simple. My father saved money. We found it. Our community shared it. That's all. But if other communities can learn from our experience, then perhaps desperation serves a purpose, teaching us that we're stronger together than alone. Returning home, they found Millfield preparing for Christmas. Lights strung between buildings created a canopy of stars. The restoration site at Riverside was wrapped like a giant present, promising spring revelation. On Christmas Eve, their small house filled with family. Michael and Patricia with both children, Sarah with her Morrison boyfriend, Kelly Chin, who'd become like another daughter. Even Marie Kowalski joined them, her wheelchair navigated by the nursing student, her scholarship supported. They sang carols around the piano Evelyn had bought with her first trust director payment. Voices blending in harmonies that transcended history. Baby Samuel conducted from his high chair, waving mashed sweet potatoes like a baton. This is wealth, Evelyn whispered to Harold. This moment, these people, this healing. He nodded, throat too tight for words. From ruin to renewal. From abandonment to abundance. From sleeping cold to warming hearts, their journey defied probability while confirming faith. Later, after guests departed and dishes were done, Harold and Evelyn sat by their small tree. No mountain of presents surrounded it. They learned to value presents over presents. But one gift waited, wrapped in silver paper. From the Historical Trust Board, Evelyn explained, handing it to Harold. Inside was a key, attached to a card reading, to Harold and Evelyn Whitmore, lifetime residency at the Victorian on Maple Street, should you choose to return home. The new owners are moving, wanting their children to grow up elsewhere. The house remembers you. Harold stared at the key, their original front door key, saved by nostalgic owners. Full circle beckoned the house that had sheltered their raising, could shelter their remaining years. "Do we want to go back?" he asked. Evelyn considered. "That house holds beautiful memories, but this home holds our rebirth. I think we stay where resurrection happened." Harold agreed, but kept the key. Sometimes symbols mattered more than functions. It would hang by their door, reminding them that homes could be lost and found, that circles could close while spirals ascended. As midnight approached, snow began falling. Not the harsh storm of their first homeless night, but gentle flakes blessing Millfield's transformation. From their window, they could see the town sleeping peacefully, secure in its renewal. "Merry Christmas, Samuel," Harold said quietly, addressing both his father and grandson. "Your legacy lives." "Merry Christmas to all who sleep in ruins," Evelyn added. "May you find treasure, whether gold or grace." They held hands, aged fingers, intertwining with practiced ease. Somewhere, other elderly couples faced foreclosure and abandonment. Somewhere, adult children made choices about convenience versus compassion. Somewhere, communities struggled against economic devastation. But here in Millfield, one couple's catastrophe had catalyzed communal redemption. They'd uncovered treasure that changed lives, starting with their own, rippling outward in waves of restoration that would continue long after they were gone. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, welcoming Christmas with bronze tones Samuel had heard a century ago. Time moved in circles and spirals, bringing endings that birthed beginnings, revealing treasures in ruins for those with courage to seek and wisdom to share. Harold and Evelyn Whitmore, once homeless, now sat at the heart of the home they'd helped rebuild not just their own, but an entire community's. They'd lost a house but found a purpose, sacrificed comfort but discovered meaning, slept in ruins but awakened an inheritance of spirit that would outlive any structure. "No regrets?" Evelyn asked, their nightly ritual. "Only gratitude," Harold replied, "for the journey that brought us here." Outside, snow continued falling on Millfield, blanketing the old and new alike in pristine possibility. The treasure had been found, shared, and multiplied. The true gold community, compassion, resilience, gleamed brighter than any coin, warming hearts through whatever winters might come. And in a small house on Oak Street, two elderly survivors turned servants of grace held each other close. Their love, the first and final treasure, the one that made all other discoveries possible. Years later, long after Harold and Evelyn had passed peacefully within months of each other, Millfield thrived as a model for community resilience. The Whitmore Center served thousands. The Historical Trust had helped revitalize dozens of dying towns. Their story was taught in economics classes and sociology seminars. But for those who knew them personally, Michael and Sarah, their grandchildren, Kelly Chen, the families they'd helped, the academic analyses missed the essential point. Two elderly people, betrayed and abandoned, had chosen courage over surrender. They'd slept in ruins rather than sacrifice dignity. And in that choice, that fundamental insistence on their own worth, they'd found treasure enough to transform a town. The ruins still stood, carefully preserved within the new community center, a reminder that sometimes we must lose everything to find what matters most. Visitors often left flowers at the corner where Harold and Evelyn first slept, understanding intuitively that sacred ground exists wherever humans choose hope over despair. Baby Samuel, grown to adulthood, became a doctor like his aunt, serving Millfield with compassion, learned from grandparents who'd showed him that wealth meant more than money, that family transcended failure, that love could rebuild anything ruins could destroy. He kept their photograph in his office, Harold and Evelyn at the Second Harvest Festival, surrounded by the community they'd saved. They looked uncomfortable with attention, but radiant with purpose, hands clasped as they'd been through every trial, eyes bright with the knowledge that they'd transformed catastrophe into grace. Beneath the photo, a simple plaque held Samuel Whitmore's words, discovered in that hidden letter, now inscribed in bronze at the community center entrance. "Trust begets trust. Compassion compounds like interest. What starts small can transform communities if carefully tended." The treasure had indeed changed lives, not through gold alone, but through the alchemy of human resilience that transforms base metal of suffering into precious ore of renewal. Harold and Evelyn Whitmore had been the catalyst, but the reaction continued. spreading outward in ever-widening circles of restoration. In Millfield and beyond, whenever communities face crisis, someone would eventually suggest, "Remember the couple who slept in ruins? Remember what they found? Remember what's possible?" And the story would be told again, inspiring new courage, new discoveries, new treasures hidden in the ruins of the human heart, waiting for someone desperate enough to dig and generous enough to share. That was the true gold. And it was infinite. As long as humans faced hardship with dignity, as long as communities chose compassion over abandonment, as long as love persisted through loss, the treasure would renew itself, compound like interest, and transform the world one heart, one family, one town at a time. The elderly couple who slept in ruins had uncovered more than gold. They discovered the inexhaustible wealth of the human spirit, and that discovery changed not just their lives, but countless lives they'd never know, rippling forward through time like golden rings in an endless pond of possibility.